Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Have you ever felt in control with your credit card, only to realize the debt is quietly growing? In today's real-life story, we follow someone who thought paying the minimum was enough, but soon faces the shocking truth and must confront the bank. This story will not only improve your English listening and vocabulary, but also teach you important life lessons about money, responsibility, and facing difficult situations. Stay with us till the end, listen carefully, and see if you can solve the quiz after the story. It all began on a bright Saturday morning. You opened your mailbox, and there it was, your very first credit card. Holding it in your hands felt strangely powerful. The glossy surface, the raised numbers, the tiny hologram. It looked like a ticket to freedom. You could finally buy whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted. The first purchase was exciting, but small, a cup of coffee at your favorite cafe. I'll just put it on the card, you thought. It felt like magic. The money didn't leave your wallet immediately, yet you still enjoyed the treat. Then came a little more. Some snacks at the convenience store, a few books online, and even a small gadget you had been dreaming about. Each swipe brought a tiny thrill, a sense of victory, and a feeling that you were managing life like a grown-up. At first, it felt harmless. You told yourself, I'll pay it off at the end of the month. It's just a little spending. But slowly, a dangerous habit was forming. Every small purchase started to pile up, almost invisibly. You didn't see it growing because the minimum payments felt manageable. You were confident. I can handle this, you said to yourself. Yet the reality of credit cards is different from cash. Each swipe, each I'll just pay the minimum moment was adding interest, tiny at first, but enough to make the debt grow faster than you imagined. It was like filling a bucket with a small hole at the bottom. You kept pouring water in, thinking it was fine, but the hole was silently leaking your control. By the end of the week, the initial thrill began to mix with a subtle worry. You noticed the balance creeping up, but you ignored it. It's just a number, you told yourself. I'll manage it later. But little did you know, that later would come sooner than expected, and it would force you to face the hard truth about credit, debt, and responsibility. In this first chapter, we see the temptation, the excitement, and the first signs of danger. Credit cards may feel like freedom at first, but they can quietly turn into a trap if you're not careful. After the thrill of your first swipe, life seemed easy. Those small purchases, another coffee, a few snacks, maybe a pair of inexpensive shoes, felt harmless. Each one was tiny on its own. But as the days passed, something unexpected started to happen. The small purchases weren't so small anymore. You began noticing the credit card statements arriving in the mail. At first, you glanced at them and shrugged. It's just a little money. I can handle it. But each month, the total kept climbing. You hadn't realized how quickly the numbers could grow. That $5 coffee here, that $20 gadget there, it added up in ways you didn't expect. Then came the interest. You didn't pay attention at first, thinking it was small, but interest is tricky. It's like snow on a hill. It starts tiny, barely noticeable, but as time passes, it piles up and grows faster than you can imagine. The minimum payment line on the statement seemed manageable, so you paid it without worry. You were confident, thinking, I'm staying on top of it. But behind that minimum payment, the debt was quietly growing. You were barely scratching the surface. Every swipe you made added more snow to the hill, and soon it was an avalanche you couldn't stop. The freedom you felt when you first got the card began to feel like a heavy weight pressing down on your shoulders. You tried to ignore it at first, avoiding the full statements, postponing payments, convincing yourself it wasn't a big deal. But then the little alerts started arriving. Payment overdue, balance increasing, interest applied. The messages were small alarms at first, easy to ignore, but each one was a warning that the problem was real. This chapter shows the danger of thinking small expenses are harmless. Credit cards make it easy to spend without seeing the immediate consequences. The excitement of buying something new blinds you to the slow-growing problem beneath the surface. What feels like freedom today can quickly turn into stress tomorrow. In the end, those tiny purchases taught a big lesson. No matter how small they seem, they can grow into a problem you cannot ignore. And soon, you would have to face the reality of your debt and confront the bank itself.
By now, the excitement of using your credit card had faded. The thrill of, "I can buy anything I want," was replaced by a quiet, gnawing worry. Every month, the statement arrived, and you dutifully made the minimum payment. It felt responsible at first. You were doing what the bank asked, after all. But slowly, you began to notice something alarming. The total debt wasn't going down. In fact, it seemed to be growing. The minimum payment is a clever trap. On the surface, it feels manageable. "I'll just pay the minimum this month," you told yourself. "That's enough." But the reality is harsh. The bank applies most of your minimum payment to interest, not to the actual debt. So while you feel like you're making progress, the balance barely moves. Sometimes it even grows because interest keeps piling on top. You started to feel stressed. The calls from the bank were polite but persistent. Reminders, warnings, automated messages. At first, you ignored them. "I'll handle it later," you thought. But ignoring the problem didn't make it disappear. Every payment cycle, you felt the pressure building. Your credit card was no longer just a tool. It had become a weight, pressing on your mind every time you saw your bank account or checked your mailbox. You began to notice little things in daily life that reminded you of the debt. The thought of shopping no longer brought joy, it brought anxiety. You found yourself checking your balance obsessively, calculating how much you could afford without making the number rise further. Even simple pleasures started to feel stressful because the card was silently controlling your decisions. This chapter is a crucial turning point. Paying only the minimum seems like a solution, but it's actually a slow trap. The stress builds quietly, often unnoticed, until it becomes overwhelming. It teaches a harsh but important lesson. Facing debt early and paying more than the minimum is the only way to truly regain control. By the end of this chapter, it becomes clear that ignoring the problem will only make it worse. The bank and the growing interest are not enemies you can avoid. They are realities you must confront. And soon, the moment would come when avoiding them was no longer an option.
By this point, the situation was becoming harder to ignore. Even though you had been making the minimum payments, the bills kept arriving, and now there were new surprises, late fees, penalties, and additional interest. It felt like the card was punishing you for every small mistake, and each fee made the balance climb even faster. You remember the first time you saw a late fee on your statement. Your heart sank. "I paid on time, didn't I?" you asked yourself. But the reality was complicated. Sometimes payments were processed a day late. Sometimes a small technical delay caused the bank to flag the account. Whatever the reason, the extra fees added insult to injury. With each new statement, frustration built. You began to feel trapped. You had tried to be responsible, but the numbers told a different story. The debt was no longer just numbers on a piece of paper. It had become a source of stress, worry, and even guilt. You felt like you were fighting a battle you couldn't win. Even daily life started to feel restricted. You hesitated before buying anything, worried about how it would affect your balance. Conversations about money with friends or family became awkward. You felt embarrassed knowing that you had been caught in a cycle of small decisions that led to a big problem. This chapter highlights a painful truth. Credit cards are not just tools, they're a responsibility. Ignoring deadlines, even by a small margin, can create a snowball effect. Late fees and extra interest are designed to protect the bank, not the cardholder. And the longer you wait to address the problem, the heavier the burden becomes. By the end of this chapter, it's clear that something must change. Avoiding the problem will only make it worse. You realize that to regain control, you will have to face the reality of your debt head on, and soon that reality will lead you to confront the bank itself. It finally hit you, the truth you had been avoiding for months. You sat down at the kitchen table with your credit card statement in front of you, staring at the numbers like they were a foreign language. The balance had grown far beyond what you expected. The minimum payments, the small purchases, the late fees, they all added up, and suddenly the illusion of control was gone. For the first time, you truly understood the trap. The credit card that once felt like freedom now felt like a chain. Every swipe, every just this once purchase had quietly pulled you deeper into debt. And no matter how carefully you calculated, it seemed like the numbers were moving faster than you could keep up. Panic set in. You tried to imagine ways to fix it. Maybe I can catch up next month, you thought. Maybe if I skip a few coffees or dinners out, I can manage it. But deep down, you knew it wasn't that simple. Interest kept accumulating, late fees kept appearing, and the debt continued to grow. It was a harsh wake-up call. The reality was unavoidable. Ignoring the problem or making only the minimum payments was no longer enough. You were in over your head, and now it was time to take responsibility. This chapter teaches an important lesson. Denial may feel comfortable in the moment, but it only delays the inevitable. Facing the truth, no matter how scary, is the first step toward regaining control. As you looked at the statement, a feeling of dread mixed with determination. The problem was real, and it was time to act. Soon, you would have to do something most people fear: pick up the phone, call the bank, and admit that you were struggling. The reality check was brutal, but it was necessary. Sometimes the hardest moments teach the most valuable lessons. In this case, the lesson was clear. Debt doesn't disappear on its own. It must be faced, understood, and managed before it spirals completely out of control. After the reality hit, panic set in. The phone calls from the bank started coming, polite, automated, and yet impossible to ignore. Each ring made your stomach tighten. At first, you told yourself, "I'll deal with it tomorrow." Then tomorrow turned into the next day and the next until you were avoiding the calls altogether. You began to feel trapped. The ringing phone became a symbol of your growing debt, a constant reminder that you couldn't hide from reality. Every time it rang, a surge of anxiety hit you. What if they said something you couldn't handle? What if you were judged for falling behind? Your pride and fear were in a silent battle with your responsibility. During this time, the stress started affecting your daily life. Sleep was restless. You avoided checking your online account, afraid of seeing the balance increase. Simple activities like going out with friends or buying groceries felt heavy because in the back of your mind, the debt was always there. It was like carrying an invisible weight that slowed every decision. Avoiding the calls didn't make the problem disappear. In fact, it made it worse. Interest kept adding up, fees continued piling on, and your mental stress grew exponentially. You realized painfully that avoidance only delayed the inevitable. The longer you ignored the bank, the more intimidating the call would feel. This chapter shows an important life lesson. Ignoring a problem rarely makes it go away. Whether it's debt, work, or personal responsibilities, avoiding the issue usually makes it worse. The first step towards solving a problem is facing it head on, even when it feels uncomfortable or frightening. By the end of this chapter, you know that you cannot hide forever. The moment is coming when you must pick up the phone, speak honestly, and confront the situation. Avoidance may feel safe, but action is the only way to regain control and reclaim peace of mind. The moment you had been avoiding finally arrived. You took a deep breath, sat at your desk, and picked up the phone. Your hand trembled slightly as you dialed the bank's number. Every ring made your heart pound. You felt a mix of fear, embarrassment, and anxiety, but deep down, you knew this confrontation was unavoidable. When a polite voice answered on the other end, you hesitated. For a moment, you almost hung up. But then you remembered all the late fees, growing interest, and sleepless nights. You swallowed your pride and said the words you had been dreading. I'm behind on my payments. I need help. The conversation was awkward at first. You explained your situation, trying to sound calm while your mind raced. Surprisingly, the representative was understanding. They explained the options, payment plans, interest reductions, and ways to regain control over your debt. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. Facing the bank was terrifying, yet strangely relieving. For months, the debt had felt like a heavy shadow over your life, and now you were finally taking action. You realized that avoidance had only made the problem grow, but confronting it opened the door to solutions. This chapter teaches a critical life lesson. Honesty and action are far more powerful than fear and avoidance. Admitting a problem doesn't make you weak, it gives you the opportunity to fix it. The bank, once a source of anxiety, became a partner in finding a way out. By the end of this chapter, you begin to feel a small spark of hope. The debt is still there, but it no longer feels insurmountable. You faced the first major step toward freedom, acknowledging the problem and taking responsibility. And with this step, you start to regain control over both your finances and your peace of mind. After facing the bank, the next challenge began, finding a way out of the growing debt. You felt nervous but determined as you listened carefully to the options the representative explained. There were payment plans, interest rate adjustments, and strategies to help you slowly reduce the balance. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a path forward. You learned that negotiation wasn't just for big businesses, it was a skill everyone could use. You explained your situation honestly, admitting how you had underestimated your spending and the interest piling up. You asked questions, explored different plans, and discussed what was feasible for your budget. Each small step felt empowering. The process wasn't easy. It required patience, careful listening, and sometimes repeating yourself to make sure the terms were clear. You realized that taking control of your finances wasn't about luck or magic. It was about understanding your options and making informed decisions. This chapter teaches an important life lesson. Problems may feel overwhelming until you actively seek solutions. Negotiation isn't a sign of weakness, it's a tool to regain control and take responsibility. By working with the bank instead of avoiding them, you turned fear into action and anxiety into a plan. By the end of this chapter, a sense of relief started to replace the stress. You weren't free from debt yet, but now there was a clear path forward. The key lesson became obvious. Facing challenges, asking for help, and negotiating solutions are the steps that turn a trap into an opportunity to learn, grow, and eventually succeed. By now, you had a plan in place with the bank, but the journey wasn't over. You realized that escaping the credit card trap wasn't just about paying off debt, it was about changing habits.
For the first time, you began thinking carefully about every purchase. You started tracking your spending. Every cup of coffee, every snack, every small online purchase was written down. You created a monthly budget, separating necessities from wants. It wasn't easy, old habits die hard, but slowly you learned to control your impulses. Financial discipline became a daily exercise. You asked yourself before every purchase, do I need this? Can I afford it without adding to debt? The small choices, which once seemed insignificant, now had real consequences. Each thoughtful decision made you feel more in control, more responsible, and more confident in your ability to manage money. You also learned to prioritize savings and emergency funds. The fear of unexpected expenses had contributed to reckless spending before. Now you understood that planning ahead reduces stress and prevents falling into the same trap again. This chapter teaches an essential life lesson. Discipline is the foundation of freedom. Facing debt once is important, but learning how to avoid it in the future is what truly changes your life. Credit cards are tools, not enemies, but only when used wisely. By the end of this chapter, the sense of empowerment was growing. You were no longer a passive participant in your finances. You were learning, adapting, and preparing for a future where debt wouldn't control your life. The trap had taught you a hard lesson, but it also gave you the skills to thrive. After months of careful planning, disciplined spending, and consistent payments, the moment finally arrived. You checked your credit card account and saw it. The balance was gone. Every dollar owed, every late fee, every creeping interest charge had been paid off. For the first time in a long while, you felt true relief. The feeling was overwhelming. You realized that freedom from debt wasn't just about money, it was about peace of mind. The anxiety that had haunted your days, the sleepless nights, the constant stress, all lifted. You had faced the problem, learned how to manage it, and now you were free. But more than that, you had learned a valuable lesson. Responsibility and discipline are powerful tools. Credit cards, if used recklessly, can create a trap, but if handled wisely, they can be a tool for convenience and growth. You had transformed fear into knowledge, stress into strategy, and debt into a lesson. Looking back, you appreciated the journey. Every mistake, every late fee, every moment of panic had taught you something important. You were no longer afraid of debt. You were prepared for it. You understood budgeting, planning, and the importance of financial discipline. Most importantly, you knew that facing a problem directly, instead of avoiding it, was the key to regaining control. This final chapter reminds us that challenges, even frightening ones like debt, are opportunities to grow. By confronting the problem, seeking help, and learning from mistakes, you can turn a crisis into a powerful life lesson. The credit card trap had almost consumed you, but it also taught you the skills to live a wiser, more responsible life. And now, with your finances under control, you could finally breathe, plan for the future, and enjoy the sense of freedom that comes from taking responsibility for your choices.
And that's the story of the credit card trap. It started as freedom and excitement, but quickly became a lesson in responsibility, discipline, and facing problems head-on. Remember, avoiding problems only makes them grow. By confronting your challenges, asking for help, and learning from mistakes, you can regain control, whether it's debt, work, or life in general. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like, share it with friends, and subscribe for more real-life stories that teach English and valuable life lessons. Now it's your turn. Try to solve the quiz and see how much you learned from this story.